Hi there, this is Justin. In this video, I'm going to show you how I like to visualize growth metrics in Tableau. Most of my clients, when they hire me and we decide that Tableau would be a good choice, want to see specific growth KPIs in a visual way so that they can monitor it and learn from the trends. So this is a very common type of work that I do for my clients, and I'm going to show you the approach I usually take. For this example, I'm going to be using the orders table from the Superstore dataset, and the KPI I'm going to focus on is orders, which we can see the data over here. I've got order date, order ID, and so on. So we're going to focus on orders and sales. Let's do that. So typically when I'm doing this kind of work, I like to visualize growth KPIs in two different ways. The first is your more standard bar chart, line chart approach, with looking at totals over time to see the trend. And I do that because the client is used to that approach. I don't want to give them anything too crazy right off the bat. And this way they can, take screenshots and easily work with that kind of view. The second type of view I build is a bit more sophisticated, and that's the moving window view, which I'll explain in more detail when we get there. So let's get started. I'm going to start by focusing on building out a bar chart of order ID. So we need count distinctive order ID and order date. And for now, I'm just going to make it by months. Go ahead here, change it to bars, just move everything around. Okay, let's put a filter in place. Now the time frame that you're going to look at by default, I always go with relative. It's going to obviously depend on, well, we actually have an issue, can't do relative because we see the dates only go until 2018, so we'll be a bit more, bit smart about it. So let's just go ahead and do relative date, months, and let's just do for, say, last 16 months, and we have some data. Okay, and you can just understand that you would typically go with last 6 months. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's drop this by 2. Okay, perfect. Go ahead and turn on labels, and you've already got your view. Now, there's a lot more we can do with this view to make it a lot more dynamic and powerful. So I'm just going to clean it up a bit. And I also like to format my visuals with a black theme. It just makes it a bit easier on the eye. Some people hate this theme and they prefer, what would you call it? They much prefer a white theme. But if you've got a nice big monitor, this is a lot more appealing in my opinion. Anyway, we'll do the styling towards the end. So what can we do with this view to make it a bit more useful to use? What I like to do is I want to make these date groupings dynamic. So the consumer of the dashboard isn't going to be stuck looking only at months as the grouping. So we can go over here and I'm going to create a parameter and I'm going to call it date period selector. Make it a string list. And I'm going to write here day, week, month, quarter, and year. By default, I'm going to let it be a month. Create that. Just going to add this to my view for now. I'm now going to go up here and create a calculated field. And I'm going to be using the if function. I'm going to create the following. So if date period selector equals day, then we want to do date trunk, date trunk day for order date. Okay. Now we can do else if. Now I can just copy this equals week date trunk week. We're going to repeat it for month, quarter, and year. Week, month, quarter, year, and don't forget the end. Okay. For the name, I like to just use the same name that I use for the parameter. So date period selector, but this time use the word calc as in calculation. And now I'm going to drag this up here. And notice what happens. By default, Tableau recognizes this as a date and it sets it to year by default. But since we have a dynamic, we can just do that. And now we're back to our months. And now we can just go ahead here and do a bit of styling. And I like to go with the following: DD month, 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 year, year. And let's make it a bit smaller. And now it looks a bit better. Let's make this 8 as well. And we're doing well. Okay. So now we can test this. We switch it between. We get different levels of granularity. And the user can decide exactly how he wants to view it. Sometimes, a month is a very big grouping. And if we're in the middle of the month, we're not going to really be able to see how we're doing. So we can look at week or day, and it works beautifully. The next thing we can do is the same type of approach, but to take advantage of the segmentation, the color segmentation option. So let's go ahead and think how we can do that. What kind of parameter, what kind of dimensions do we have here? We have customer name. We could try that. Segment. Just go and have a look. Okay, let's use segment and customer name as examples. So let's go ahead and create another parameter and call this segmentation. We're going to go ahead and create integer list. We're going to go ahead with customer name. And, whoops, change integer to string, my bad. Customer name, segment. And we mustn't forget, we also want none, which would be the default. Okay, so move none to the top. Pick none as the default. Let's go ahead and share that to the view. And now we're going to create our calculate field if segmentation equals none, then nothing, right? Else if segmentation equals customer name, then customer name, else else if, well, we can just do else segment and end. Okay, segmentation calc. Let's see if that works. So if we go ahead and put it over here. Okay, none is the default, so everything, there's no segmentation, which is what we want. Customer name. Now we get a breakdown of all the different customers. Obviously, you can see this won't be too useful because it's very, very granular. Segment is probably much better, which it is. So these two selectors work very well together, and it's also scalable. So as more dimensions are added to the data, you can come into the dashboard and update it and add additional segmentations very easily. So let's go ahead and name our sheet. So we can call this growth orders bar. And you know what, let's go ahead and create our dashboard. And the first thing I want to do is put some styling. Go ahead and put this vertical divider. Go ahead and add text. And we're going to call this order growth. Let's go ahead and make it 16, bold. Okay. Can go ahead and edit the height. Make this 60. Perfect. Go ahead and drag this over here for now. I'm going to go ahead and hide the title. You can see it's taken up the entire view. We don't want that, so let's just go ahead and add a blank. And you can leave this on the side, but the approach I like to take is to add 2 horizontals. And the first one I'm going to call selectors. I'm going to make this white 8. And I'm now going to drag my selectors in here. Okay. Perfect. Put a blank. Space it out. Let's rename. Yeah, we'll rename everything at the end. Put that in there. Okay. Just got to play around with the sizing. This I want to call date period. Okay, date period select is fine. Let's make it white. 8. Okay. Segmentation, perfect. Now, what we're going to do is add another horizontal divider, add text, filters. I think you're starting to see the style. This is my own style. I mean, I didn't read this, didn't come up with this any fancy way, just from experience. And I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to add the order date filter, which is kind of the most relevant filter. It's gonna, Tableau's gonna do some funny things every now and then. Okay, you know what, let's go ahead and also have segment. We use segment, oops, and customer name as additional filters. What am I doing? Okay, let's go back here. Just changes growth orders, order growth rather, growth. Okay, and that's it. That's our first view. You can see what you probably want to do is go ahead and make this standard. Maybe spread it out a bit. Oops. And this way, it's not going to be too cramped if you want to look at a lot of different groupings. Okay. Now let's move on to the second view that will also cover order growth, but using the moving window method. So before we do that, I just want to resize my dashboard so we have a bit more space for the second view. So I'm just going to do that. Let's move this up and let's lock this in place. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to create a new sheet, drag that over here. And by the way, another big tip is I like to use colors to mark the different, I kind of group it in a logical way using color. So in this case, we're talking about a specific theme, which is growth orders. So I'm going to put all the sheets relating to growth orders in the same color. I'm just going to call this MW for moving window. I'm also going to go ahead and copy the formatting and paste it over here so that we can save some time without having to reset everything. So I have over here the function that I use to create my moving windows. I'll be happy to share this. It's using the window sum function in Tableau, and then there's this if, which ends up removing pieces of it, basically removing the tail, and I'll explain in a second why that's important. So basically the last data points up to the window range that we're going to be using is removed, and then that's going to be the null, and then every other data point is going to be populated by your window sum function. To get a bit clearer in another minute or two. So let's go ahead, copy paste that, and you'll immediately see that we're missing this window range parameter, and we also need to switch out exactly what we're counting. So I want to be actually counting orders here, so count distinct. Oops, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of the bracket, count distinct, and we want order ID. Okay, and now I'm just going to close it for a sec. I'm going to go ahead and create a parameter called window range. It's going to be a string list. Oops, it's actually an integer. And we want the following values: 1, 7, 14, 28, 35, and 91. Now, why these specific values? Well, I want you to notice that except for the first one, they're all multiples of 7. The reason for that is because we want to eliminate the weekend effect. In essence, what we're doing now is we're creating a calculator field which is going to be summing up a specific range of values across the available data. So let me go ahead and finish the calculation and show you the view, and then it will become a bit clearer. Cool. So our field is done, but notice on its own it doesn't really show us much. And in this case, we're now going to go to orders and take order date. And what's important in this case is we want to do day, and we want to keep it as continuous. Okay, so it looks very messy. Let's go ahead and where's our parameter? Window range, and we want to change this to 28. Okay, we can just hide this indicator. Let's do a bit of cleanup. Okay, great. Over here, this is important. You want to click on show missing values. You can notice it actually changed the graph. So what are we seeing here exactly? Well, right now the window range is set to 28 days, which means that each data point in this line graph is the sum of orders in the previous 28 days. Okay, so a typical line graph is going to look really messy like this with a lot of variance, but 28 days is going to be basically summing up 4 full weeks backwards, and then that becomes the window, and then the previous data point is the previous 28 days. And that way you essentially, each data point is grouping the previous 28 days, and then it moves as the graph is, as you go along the graph backwards. Now, if we didn't have that extra piece in our function over here, where we're actually eliminating the tail, then this is going to end up moving towards 0, because each data point ultimately doesn't have 28 days, right? There's going to be a point where the available data, because you're actually getting to the beginning of your data set. Right now, there's no filter, right? So this point over here is the last point where we have 28 previous days. So, I mean, we're looking here over 4 years, which is why this graph has so much variance for a 28-day period. So let's go ahead and add a filter here. And since we need to go back a bit, let's do what we did before by doing, I think it was 14, and that will give us the last 6 months. Okay, so that's a bit better, right? It looks a bit clearer, and you can actually, what's really useful in this view specifically is to do mark labels first and last, and you can kind of see that right now in the previous 28 days, assuming this was the current date, of course, there's been 206 orders that were created. If we go all the way 6 months earlier, we were generating 102 orders. So you can see that, you know, you have still a lot of variance over a 28-day window, and we can go all the way to 91. So now basically what we're doing is each data point is the previous 91 days, which is, correct my math if I'm right, 714. Yeah, so it's the last 13, it's 13 weeks, right? And you can see obviously it's a lot more flatter because we're grouping it significantly larger than before, right? So this moving window is very, very helpful to get rid of the noise, and there's a lot you can learn from it. So you can see there's now actually there was a downward trend, and then a bit of a bump, but it's still on a downward trend, where our max for a 28-day window was up here. So if I was this business, I would want to really understand what is creating these peaks. You know, there's probably a seasonal effect or something like that. And now if I was the head of sales, I'd be a bit worried because we actually have a pretty steep drop compared to where we were, you know, not that long ago. So now that we've got, sorry about that. Now that we've got this view, we can go ahead and add it to our dashboard. So let's go ahead and add it over here. Mark that, hide the title. Let's go ahead and add a blank in between. Okay, and over here we're going to have our moving window, so we can go ahead and use the same approach. Selectors. Okay, go ahead and drag this down here. Lined up. Blank. And there we go. Maybe make a bit more space. Now, I'm not going to do it in this video, but you could also use the same approach. Actually, let's go ahead and do it because it's easy. We have our segmentation calc. You can do that over there. Show parameter control, and very, very easily now we can actually look at our moving windows across different segments. So we can actually see something interesting here, that consumer is a hell of a lot more volatile versus corporate and home office. You can also see that corporate has grown, it's almost doubled in this period in terms of a 28-day window, with consumer actually more than doubling. But consumer seems to be a lot more volatile. Cool. So the only issue with this approach is that if I wanted to dissect this view, I've got to go all the way up here and change the segmentation. So a way to get around that, even though it's a lot more work, is to basically just duplicate everything. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate segmentation and just indicate it as for the moving window. And then we need to duplicate over here. Moving window, and not to forget, we need to change the parameter used. And now if we go back to our dashboard, go ahead and get the new parameter. Drag this down here. Okay. Clean up. White. 8. Let's do the same here. Okay, now we have, we can, oops, what's going on? Oh, I forget. We need to move this over here. Okay, cool. So now this selector, right, allows us to segment that view, and this view is independent. So I could look here, for example, customer name, and over here at segment, they're interchangeable. This is quick when you got 2 views, but imagine you had 30 views. It's a lot of extra parameters and calculator fields that you need to select. And actually for the moving window, it probably makes sense to do entire view. And depending on your preference, you could change this back to entire view. And the only issue is, once again, if you're looking at a lot of periods, you can have this issue where it starts to squeeze the view, versus if you went standard and you did that, you would now have the scroll bars. That's just how your consumer prefers it. So that's it. I really hope you found this useful. If you build Tableau dashboards, I'm curious to hear what you think, and what adjustments you would make. Obviously, if this was for a client, I'd do a bit more cleanup and labeling, the tooltips haven't been touched, etc. But this is a very common approach I take when covering growth-related metrics for clients. Thanks for watching.